Barry Silverberg, Director of the Center for Nonprofit Studies at Austin Community College, and welcome to Civil Society, where we explore issues affecting our communal well-being through a nonprofit lens. We're a proud partner of ACC TV, but given COVID-19, we continue to operate virtually for this, our 5th season. This episode is part of our series on the Asian Pacific Islander experience in Austin, which includes people from at least 25 countries who represent 40 different ethnic groups. This diverse community makes up at least 8% of Austin's population and is growing rapidly. Asian Americans are often overlooked. Partly this can be attributed to the model minority myth, the assumption that all Asians are wealthy, highly educated, and therefore are not needing of social services. My guest today is Darlene Lanham, Executive Director of the Asian Family Support Services of Austin, which helps hundreds of survivors of family or sexual violence each year. Since November 2018, she has led the only culturally specific agency that offers long-term case management, housing, economic justice, and outreach and prevention efforts in the 10 counties surrounding Central Texas. As a survivor and as a biracial woman of Taiwanese heritage who emigrated to Texas by adoption, she knows the level of power and resilience and essential supports that it takes to create a life of basic safety, dignity, and independence. Darlene has more than 15 years of leadership in association management and public affairs service, as well as leading workshops to create communities, quote, where everyone belongs, using a model from the National Coalition Building Institute. We'll ask her about that model in a few minutes. Her past includes service as Managing Director of Hill Country Advisory Group, a public affairs firm serving associations and nonprofits and small businesses in the US and Asia. Darlene is past chair of the Capital Area Council of Governments Criminal Justice Advisory Committee, which prioritizes grant funds on behalf of the governor's offices for services such as domestic violence shelters, which currently have to turn away nearly 50% of requests for emergency shelter due to inadequate funds and limited capacity. She's also a past chair of the City of Austin Commission on Women. She serves on the board of Texas Council on Family Violence, which provides technical assistance and policy advocacy for organizations serving survivors of violence across Texas, and, God, she's busy, a board trustee of the University of the West in Rosemead, California, where higher education is informed by Buddhist wisdom. We'll expect some bon mots from her as a result. And the student body is almost entirely domestic first-generation students or students from other continents. Darlene earned her master's degree from the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm really thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with Darlene and for us to all benefit from her perspective and insights about the Austin Asian American community, and especially about her clientele and what she does day to day, which so many of us in our community are unaware of. So welcome, Darlene.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for focusing a series on the Asian American experience here in Central Texas. It's been a tough time lately for our friends and neighbors, and I really appreciate the opportunity to lift up the joy and complexity and identity of our very diverse community. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for making time to be with us. So before we go any further, why don't you tell us a little bit about Darlene? Talk about growing up biracially as both Taiwanese and white, and some of those experiences and how that informs what led you to what you're doing today.
Well, I think where I would start is even with my name. Darlene Lanham is my second name, and it was given to me by John Lanham. He was a white man, working class from Northeast Texas, married a lady from Shreveport, Louisiana. They met at Kilgore Junior College in East Texas, and flash forward, landed themselves in Taiwan, in Taipei, Taiwan in the mid-70s. My first name was Huang Wenqing. That was the name that was given to me by my biological mother. For so many reasons, she was not able to keep me, but one being primarily that when I was born, I looked too white. I think through her eyes, all she could see was my whiteness, and I think that represented a very long future, a hard future for her. It's funny, I met her about 11 years ago, and I'm very,
Wow.
yeah, very lucky to have a relationship with her and a sister. And they talked about arranging my adoption. I got to learn about my story, and I found out they had arranged through a Christian mission working in Taipei that was adopting, arranging adoptions between, Chinese babies and American citizens. And so that's the agency, informal agency that arranged my adoption. But my mother's best friend Vivian says, she said, we found that those Christians, and thank goodness for those Christians, they'll take anybody. And I think it just
That
really,
made you feel good, huh?
it just really illustrates the dynamics I think that my mother was up against. But growing up with my adoptive family, we lived in many countries in Asia and Southeast Asia. We lived in South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Malaysia, and I was surrounded by my people. My parents, my white parents, were the racial minority. They were expatriates. And most of my racialized experiences, didn't happen to me until moving to the US. I think the first time, happened in the US when I was about 15 years old, and then as a young adult in college, and really up through present day. So it was just kind of interesting.
How did when people identified you as Asian, okay, how did they react to you that was different than when they identified you as white?
I remember being a teenager, and I'm going with some friends to a party, and I was going to be a driver. I was here in the US, and we were driving, and there was a group of people, and one of the young girls who was with us just refused to ride with me in my car because I was Asian.
Really?
Yes, yeah, that really happened. It's
I hope you made her walk.
I really was just stunned, and defensive and confused and hurt. I mean, I remember it so vividly, standing
Sure.
in the street, and but I wasn't alone. I had friends, but that, these things happen, and they happen very young. It's the
Yeah.
hyper, very racialized society that we live in.
Yeah, they stick with you for sure. So what led you to do what you do?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of privilege, panic, and ability, right? And so when I think about privilege, I think that I was very privileged to have had financial resources available to me growing up, in my family, and also privileged to have physical ability. My adoptive mom was injured in an auto accident. She was hit by a semi truck in her car. Yes, and so she suffered traumatic brain injury, lost her vision, a lot of motor skills. And that happened when I was about 3 years old. And so I always grew up being very conscious of my abilities, my ability to see, my ability to move my body, to walk. And so I always felt hyper able. So I think that we had this, combination of, and I did notice too, that sort of unprocessed trauma of, of my mother's accident, and the changes that she went through. And my father became hyper vigilant around, safety, care, caution, and my sisters too. So, we were just driven with panic to caretake one another with this hypervigilance, knowing that a debilitating injury was just around the corner, at any second. So it all combined very nicely for, for emphasizing on accomplishments and studying and working hard and being careful.
So that led you to be concerned about other people.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I think that the caretaking gene runs very deep and was, definitely emphasized, doing for others what they're unable to do for themselves, being in deep touch with other people and their experiences. Absolutely. I think also, being an adoptee in an interracial family, I had two sisters who were the biological children of my parents. And so I think that, it was very loving. I came from a very loving and welcoming and accepting family, but I just looked different. And so just finding that place where I belong to, I think was there. And helped me also connect with other people who may be wondering where they belong in a space.
That experience of being other always sensitizes people. And I think when you talk to a lot of people in the social services arena, if you go into their background, you find out that something in their background left them feeling marginal or other, which increases that sense of sensitivity to all the other people that are perceived as different. So,
right. I mean, it's like, there are some ways we cannot escape that being othered, that it's weighed on us and it's hurt us. But we found our power through it. We found our resilience, and we want to make it a better place for our friends and neighbors and future generations.
So resilience seems to be a very important component of your work. Can you talk a bit about the guiding principles and philosophy of the Asian Family Support Services and a little more about what they do, what you do?
Yes, yeah. So we believe that Asian and immigrant people are powerful and resilient. We believe that survivors of violence are powerful and that we don't have to be defined by the victimization or victimizations. We believe in that we can create a world together that doesn't have violence, where people don't need to use abuse or power or control. Our values are to prevent, advocate, respond, and transform. And those values really drive how we approach our services. And they spell out the word part. So I think that's in recognition of the fact that everybody has a part to play in healing and creating the kind of communities that we want to live in. We provide very complete and comprehensive case management for survivors or with survivors of violence. We act as a team to anybody who wants to come in and receive our help. And it's more like standing shoulder to shoulder with them as they lead their way forward. We talk a lot about cultural humility, and we're a Pan-Asian organization comprised of Pan-Asian, Latinx, African, US, Anglo people. And so, not every one of us is going to have the exact framework of every client who comes in. And so we work a lot on our positioning and our identities, which identities have dominance and privilege, which ones don't, and how does that shape our framework? And so we really come in, with an awareness of our own identities, and then how, where does that survivor want to go with her future? Where do they want to lead their way?
Now, you just used the pronoun her.
I
And
did.
the question is, there are men who are living in, or are not just the victimizers, but the victims. Does your agency serve males?
We do. We serve males, we serve intersex people, we serve asexual people. And if you want to think about it in terms of gender identity, we
You just serve people.
yes, the full range of gender identity. We do not discriminate. Well, we're all for civil rights. We don't discriminate based on identity. It's just that living here in Central Texas, USA, we emphasize our outreach and programming in Asian languages And we have a lot of experience around immigration experience as it intersects with being a survivor of violence or being a person living here. So that's where our expertise is geared, but we do serve everybody.
So doing a little background search on you, you were quoted in the August 2020 Austin American Statesman saying, and I just want to quote and give you a chance to comment on it. The experience of racism can perpetuate violence and abuse. It makes a difference when deciding to leave a violent relationship. Survivors might choose to stay in an abusive situation if they see Asians as are being blamed for the pandemic, or if they cannot access basic resources such as food, safe shelter, medical care in their home language or in a culturally accessible way. Your website, I believe, talks about how you have people who can communicate, I believe, in 30 different languages. So how has the pandemic affected your clients in general and specifically?
It's made everything more complicated. Survivors of violence who are Asian in a pandemic face a triple threat of one, staying safe, in the pandemic, then staying safe and safety planning in an experience of abuse or violence. And then now there's been the increase in racial targeting, blaming East Asians for bringing the pandemic to the U.S. and East Asians being blamed for the economic fallout. And so when you add these conditions together, it looks pretty bleak. Now it's not impossible. We do still have many people making the decision to leave, and we're supporting them, but it's been Herculean. We're having to work harder to do basic things. Safety planning is already very complex and nuanced. And then when you add in the level of, that that social distancing is happening. Shelters, there was a problem with access to shelters before the pandemic. Now that shelters are doing social distancing, those spaces are harder to get. And so we have to be more creative and find different ways for folks who are ready to leave to stay safe and have a safe place to go.
So what does it take? Because I think some people, well, I guess a lot of people, probably have a hard time putting themselves in the shoes of somebody who's been abused and so forth. So in your own words, can you describe what it takes for, I assume most of your clients are women, but for a woman to make the decision to leave a terrible situation, but a familiar situation, and to go into uncharted waters and to reach out to your agency?
I would say that there are a lot of decisions. There's a lot of math that has to happen. Think of based on the sort of demographic and the statistics of the folks that we've seen, there are a number of mothers, of children, of citizens who they themselves may not have status. They also.
So you mean they're undocumented?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And so there's often language barriers. So, you're living here in, Austin, Texas, USA. You speak a language that is not Spanish or not English, and don't have much fluency in English. You've got children who, may be citizens. You're in an abusive situation. So what are your prospects for independence? Will you be able to see your children again? The cycle of power and control plays out so differently, but intensely. And it's tough. Where are you going to work? Where are you going to stay? How will you live? How will you get an income? And Asian Family Support Services of Austin and our whole community come together to create that safe possibility for survivors to move forward. So we have served in 30 different languages. Our 24/7 hotline is language accessible in any language 24/7. If we don't have access to the language in-house through our own caseworkers, we have a very fluid, well-trained staff that access the language line, or we work with community interpreters when it makes sense.
A small little detail, just personal interest. So when I call, do I identify my language right up front and you try to get somebody?
Yes,
Or
you can. Yes, I mean, you could call speaking in your language, and if we don't recognize what the language is up front, we'll work with you to identify the language.
well, I'm from Brooklyn, so I'm not sure what language I speak. So staying on the question of violence just for another second. So how widespread is the problem, particularly in the Asian community?
Yes, well, I want to ask you, how widespread does it have to be for you to care? I mean, just in general.
One person.
Right, one person. That's enough. Right answer. um, it's hard to know, Barry. So what we do know is that up to 55% of Asian women experience intimate partner violence. And also what we know that is in Central Texas, there are about 19,000 cases of family violence reported to law enforcement in a year. Now that's not disaggregated by race. And so what the rub there is, and the point I'm trying to make is that our data on Asian demographic is not often disaggregated. I was trying to do some research a few months back, and I went to the Texas, the Department of Public Safety crime reports, and I saw that the Asian Pacific Islander demographic was combined with Native American. So our demographic was combined. And so it's hard to get the data. There's not enough disaggregated data. But there are about 200,000 and growing. That was from the old census, 200,000 Asian Pacific Islander identified folks in Central Texas. That it gets more complicated too, because in the census, a lot of Central and Western Asian folks may be identifying as white on the census because of the way those categories are structured. But when they come into services at AFSSA, they identify as Asian or immigrant or Latinx or African or USer, but they self-identify. So I'll say at AFSSA, we end up serving about 200 clients per year for family violence services, and then through our community and outreach, about 5,000.
So what are some of the key challenges that you and your agency face?
The pandemic is definitely one of them. Everything is harder. We're seeing an increase for basic needs support, for rental supports. We were very lucky last year to be one of the first 4 agencies in the city of Austin for the relief in a state of emergency. We were able to distribute almost $1 million in direct relief rental supports, $1,000 and $1,200 and $1,500 in gift card supports to families in our community. But that was here in Travis County. Now we serve 10 counties in Central Texas, and so not every jurisdiction was able to respond in that way, but there is definitely an ongoing challenge for basic needs support, rental support, those economic, healthcare, those supports that create the possibility for safety and independence.
So what can Austinites, or either Asian or not Asian, do to be of help to your agency and its work?
Yeah, I invite you to join with us. We would be so delighted for every Austinite, every Central Texan to join with us to create safe spaces and safe communities for Asian and immigrant people. And I would say, bring us your heart, bring us your hands, bring us your dollars. We have got a lot of volunteer opportunities in terms of hands. We would really love extra support with pro bono legal services for family law, immigration law. If you have employment opportunities or educational opportunities, in terms of your heart, you know, value us beyond our work ethic, love our people as much as you love our food, right? You know, in terms of dollars, because of the increase in basic needs and the difficulties and the challenges in creating safe spaces, that the dollars help. You know, many of our government contracts require matching dollars. And I would also invite people to celebrate us. We work hard all year long, and we do a community celebration, the Silk Road, in the fall. We find ways to celebrate our people, our cultures, our heritage, and all that we've done together as a community.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So one of the things that you're involved in is dealing with diversity, obviously. And so can you describe what work you do with or how you use the resources of National Community Building Institute? What is its operating model?
It's an international organization, and so it's going to look different in Switzerland than it does in Brazil. It's going to look different in New York, Texas, California. But here in Texas, there are community-based chapters and university-based chapters. So if you're connected with a university, there may be a national coalition building chapter there. Here in Central Texas, you know, it's a community-based model, and so the membership are, you know, agency leaders, community members who are trained in the process and the method and the skills, and meet together and serve as a resource team. So it's very grassroots. It depends on where it is. In Switzerland, it's actually institutionalized with the national government. So
We don't want that here. So dealing with identity in general, okay, and as you pointed out, your identity is somewhat complex, okay?
Yeah.
How do you and your family or friends maintain their heritage, be it Asian in general, or which I know is a very broad, almost ridiculous term, and your own Taiwanese background?
Yeah, so remember, I claim Texas and Taiwan, and I think what that looks like in my family is that when we gather together for Christmas, we listen to Buddhist chanting. Or when we go to the ranch in the hill country for a vacation, we eat beef noodle soup. Or, you know, we do two-stepping and karaoke in the same night. And I'm still, as an adoptee, you know, like connecting with the past generations and learning. But through my relationship with University of the West, which was founded by the Fo Guangshan order of Buddhism, I feel completely connected to Buddhist culture and, you know, Buddhist honoring the Buddhist spirit of speak good words, think good thoughts, do good deeds. And there's a temple here in Austin that I find a lot of peace and sanctuary in visiting. So that's sort of how it looks, being both Texan and Taiwan.
Just out of curiosity, what language is Buddhist prayer usually or Buddhist meditation conducted in? Just your native language, or is there a religious language?
Sanskrit, I think, is the original language, but it's expressed in many different languages. The Fo Guangshan order of Buddhism is Chinese, and so it's, you know, Mandarin or Cantonese, but it could be Thai, it could be, you know, it could be any language expressed in the language of the home country.
So if let's stay on you for a second, because you're absolutely fascinating. So,
or a mess.
Knowing what's happened in your life, knowing what you know about life experiences, etc., what would you say to your younger self? Maybe that 15-year-old girl, young lady who is feeling, oh my God, why won't this person get in my car?
You know, I think I would say, well, we can be in service to one another, but without being in servitude, right? So we can we can be in service to our family, community, society, without the power and control dynamic. And I would say Darlene, you make a place for yourself in every relationship, your family, your work, your community, and that the people who use violence or the people who use bullying or have unresolved hate in their heart, I mean, they learned it somewhere, right? I mean, I think we were all born innocent. It's one of the NCBI philosophies that I call on a lot. We were all born innocent. And I would say also that you don't have to face it alone. I think there's a tendency for young people, especially now in the pandemic, to isolate. And, people are not reaching out for one another. And so I would say, but there are plenty of people that are ready to team up with you to help you create a space for yourself, to claim your space just exactly as who you are, which is a perfect person, not to be confused with perfectionism, but.
Right. So who have been some of your mentors? Who are some of the role models that when you get into a tough situation that you say, this is what so-and-so would say?
Yeah, well, my dad is not quotable on this program, but my late father.
But influenced.
He's always the first person I think of, and my dad, may he rest in peace. He really taught me to be truthful, to be loyal, and to keep showing up when things are hard. So when things get tough, you don't walk away for convenience, you stay in. I learned from a mentor of mine and friend, Guillermo Lopez, don't apologize for the things that were done to you. I think that there's this tendency, and I don't know if it's, female programming or grooming or what, that everything's our fault all the time. And we're sorry, and I'm sorry. And, I learned to not apologize to things that were done to me. So I think that's part of unlearning oppression.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So given it must be difficult both working directly with people who have been subject to abuse, who may have lost a sense of hope and possibility, but also overseeing an operation that's what you do day in and day out. How do you step back? How do you relax? How do you reaffirm your own sense of personal mission?
I can't escape it. I'm consumed by it. I wouldn't say that I'm a very good model of work-life balance. I don't. I eat well, right? I eat well. I try and take care of my physical health, but my emotional health is incredibly balanced by the amazing team that I work with and the community that we're in. I feel like I use my senses that I have, back to my hyper ability. Like I have vision, so I can see good things. I see people smile and lean in toward one another. I hear kind words spoken and words of solidarity that fill me up through every moment of the day. I have a heart, so I feel togetherness. I just observe it, and to borrow a term from my Jewish mentor, Sherry Brown, the founder of NCBI, who borrows a term from her Christian friends, is to witness, and I witness every day the beautiful parts of humanity in coming together through challenges. It's incredible. It's
That's a great answer. It's a great perspective. I didn't realize Sherry Brown was the founder of that. I used to read her work when she did some work for the American Jewish Committee, probably now 40 years ago, I hate to say. But so that's interesting connection.
Yes, it's a small world.
It's a very small world. Darlene, this has been absolutely fascinating and insightful. You are awesome. And on behalf of the viewers and people who can't say it directly to really appreciate the hard work that you do and the service you provide. And I hope that others will be supportive in the ways you indicated earlier. I thank you very much for taking this time with us, and wish you the very, very best in your continuing work. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that when the pandemic is over, we have a cup of coffee. All right.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Darlene. And thank you also. I want to highlight to Kate Tolliver, our managing producer, for her support and assistance. You can read more about Darlene and the Asian Family Support Services of Austin. And hopefully you can offer something of your economic wherewithal as well as your time and energy to help deal with and work with the folks that Darlene and her agency work with. You can read more about this and see our previous and future episodes of Civil Society at nonprofitaustin.org/civil-society. Thank you very much for listening and have a great day. You all take care.